Hey, I got a question for you. Do you want to summon an assload of fairies and then shove them right up your opponent's... Hey everybody, my name is Suris, and I make budget commander decks that can dominate tables without dominating your wallet. So if that's something that you value, maybe consider subscribing to me and letting a couple friends know what I'm doing over here. And today we're going to be revisiting a deck that I made about 2 years ago and definitely need to update for the modern era. And I also need to take that deck and fix some of the problems that existed with it when I was using a older and much less refined version of my current deck design theory. That commander is Alela, Artful Provocateur, and originally I made her as an Anthems deck, and while that was pretty decent in its own right, there are a couple of issues. For one, I didn't have the stringent adherence to rigorously goldfishing every deck that I do now, and on top of that, the deck had a lot of cards that had a lot of high mana values, and that doesn't really work for a deck that wants to, play a bunch of spells in a single turn in order to summon a ton of tokens. And when I built that deck, it was before the bracket system existed, so the expectation of winning a game by turn 6 was not yet implemented into the ethos of, what bracket 3 or power level 7 happens to be now. Now that those expectations are more well laid out, we know that we need to build this such that it can present either a lethal board state or enough of a board state to be threatening by turn 6 or 7 in order to operate in bracket 3. So let's update the deck accordingly and see what we can make. But before I get into that, I do need to celebrate all of you. So let's talk about the fan art y'all came up with, and this one is from Riddle of Lightning. No context, but it is a Suris in a bottle, which I can only assume some dumb motherfucker is gonna try to actually let out. Please never do that, it will lead to the apocalypse. Then Loudy Cat decided to jump on the trend at the time of the galvanized square steel. If you've ever seen those really terribly AI done home renovation videos, then you know where this is coming from. And here is a bit of fan art for the Maid Suris costume from Pernia. And with that said, thank you everybody for your fan art submissions. If you want your fan art to be shown in a future video, the best way to do so is to drop it right into the Discord server so that people can see it and then I can throw it into the channel. That said, that's it for that. Now all we gotta do is talk about the deck itself. So let's get into the core strategy of how we're gonna be playing Alela. Now, the commander we're going to be talking about today is the mistake Alela, Artful Provocateur. And the reason she's a mistake has nothing to do with her parents. It has everything to do with the fact that this commander was made alongside Corvold, Tulane, and, well, the entire idea of printing paper brawl decks for the, 3 people who care about that format. Okay, so now that we've got her origins out of the way, let's talk about what we're going to be doing. So she's got Flying, Death Touch, and Lifelink, so we know it's easy to get her in and attack people, and she gives all other creatures on our board that have Flying 1 extra power. And anytime we cast an artifact or enchantment spell, we will then be creating a blue fairy token. Now, this obviously opens up avenues for building an Artifact Central Alela deck that is incredibly powerful, and when I built the original version, I built it more with enchantments in mind because I wanted to play lots of Anthems. The problem is that deck was nightmarishly linear, and despite the fact that I enjoyed it, I didn't really have the same rigorous goldfishing standards as I do now, so we need to update it and get a lower mana curve than what the original deck had. So let's go ahead and see what we can come up with. I am going to keep some remnant of the original idea of having it as an Anthem-based deck, but I'm going to be cutting chaff out rigorously and running a few new cards that have been introduced into the game. So for 2 mana, we have Air Nomad's Legacy, which gives us a little bit of draw and also gives all of our creatures that have Flying 1/0, Intangible Virtue, which gives all of our tokens 1/1 and Vigilance, Rally the Ranks gives all of our fairies 1/1, Inspiring Leader gives all of our tokens 2/2, and, well, after that we got Radiant Destiny to give everything 1/1 and Vigilance. Everything else we have that is an Anthem is going to cost a little more mana though. Starlight Spectacular can basically win a game on its own if we have a lot of tokens, so we're going to be running that since it gives all of our creatures 1/1, then 2/2, then 3/3, then 4/4, staircasing all the way up until we hit lethal. Marcel's Anthem costs 4 and gives us 1/1 to all of our creatures, which is not very good, but its multi-kicker allows us to reanimate creatures from our grave. Our deck may only be running 10, but one of those is our commander, and we are a build-around deck, so having ways to get the commander out of the graveyard is really good when they otherwise would be overcosted. Then we have Force of Virtue, which allows us to give all of our creatures 1/1, and it's got Flash, and if we cast it at Flash speed, then we get to, well, have bullshit happen. It's a Force of card, so we don't actually have to pay for it. So now this is a 0 mana +1/+1 card. And because our deck is rocking a pretty hefty draw package, 13 cards in fact, it should be very easy to have an extra white card in hand in order to play this. But again, I mentioned we are a build around commander, so we need ways to protect our commander. This is where Giant's Amulet comes in. For 1 mana, we can drop it down and give our commander 2 mana's worth of protection, granting us hexproof. Do note, though, it only works if our commander is untapped, so try not to use this when you're trying to swing with your commander as well. Make sure that she's actually sitting on the sidelines when you do. Then we have Kindred Boon, a card that lets us choose fairy, and then make any fairy we put a divinity counter on indestructible. Then we have Etchings of the Chosen, which gives all of our creatures 1/1, making it an anthem, but it allows us to pick fairy and then sacrifice any fairy to give any other fairy indestructible. This means that we don't just have hexproof to protect our creatures, and we don't just have indestructible to protect one creature. Now we can do things like sacrificing half our board of fairies to make the other half indestructible, meaning that we have ways to circumvent our opponents trying to wipe our entire board, since we are a go-wide deck, and that is in fact our weakness. Speaking of weaknesses, we need to address another elephant in the room. We are a build-around deck, and that means that our commander is way too important for our strategy. This means that for our opponents to disrupt us, they only need to knock out Alela a couple of times, and then our deck just kind of stops working. To circumvent that, we need more ways to summon the tokens that Alela likes, or ways to create redundancy for Alela. So let's talk about the ways we're going to be doing that. Archon of Sun's Grace gives us a 2/2 Pegasus creature with flying every time an enchantment enters the battlefield under our control. Mischievous Mystic allows us to get a blue fairy, the same kind our commander makes, anytime we draw our second card during a turn. Fairy Formation gives us the ability to draw cards while spawning blue fairies on anybody's turn, and then we have Ember Island Production and Chameleon Master of Disguise. These can be used to clone our commander, who not only gives us extra tokens, but also doubles as an anthem in and of herself. Then we have Extravagant Replication, a card that, at the worst, can make copies of our fairy tokens, but at its best is going to be making copies of other cards that we care about, like Mischievous Mystic, Archon of Sun Grace, or any of our anthems. And then we have Ghostly Dancers, a card that is really fun to copy with replication. Ghostly Dancers gives us a little bit of graveyard recursion for our enchantments, but also says whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield, we can make a 3/1 spirit, but it also makes a spirit when we unlock a room. So what kind of room do we want to run? Well, I think since our deck is only rocking 24 enchantments, the best room we could run is gonna be the Secret Arcade. This gives all non-land permanents we control and permanent spells we control the enchantment type. So the 10 creatures we have in our deck that are not all enchantments now suddenly are enchantment spells on top of what they were previously. This also means when we recast our commander, she will be an enchantment spell, triggering any of our other enchantment synergies. This also doubles as a pseudo-anthem, since anytime we cast an enchantment spell, we get to put a number of 1/1 counters on a creature equal to the mana value of that spell. Since this is turning a bunch of the mana rocks in this deck into enchantments, it's going to be really easy to get a lot of extra counters off of Dusty Parlor. And that does it for our core strategy. We want to run a lot of cards that give us enchantment synergies so that we can attack with our commander and, well, a ton of extra fairies. Because our deck needs to double spell very often in order to get enough fairies to win games, we need to have a really low mana curve, and as such, if you look at the mana curve of the deck, we have mostly 2 mana costing spells. We are a very aggressive curve, and we will be mulliganing to make sure we have at least 1 mana rock at all times so that we can be on the offense as early as possible. Next, let's talk draw spells, and we've got a fair few of them from the original deck, but we've got more as well we need to talk about. First of all, from the original deck, we have Bident of Thassa, Coastal Piracy, and, well, I think that's about it, along with Military Intelligence. All of these give us access to draw for punching people in the face, but some new additions are Waterbender's Ascension, which gives us that ability for less mana, but only if we can attack with multiple creatures to get it online. Thopter's Spy Network, which only gives us the extra draw if we hit with one of our Thopters instead of the other fairies, but in exchange, it does summon Thopters for us, letting us get higher amounts of tokens on the board, which makes it easier for us to get closer to lethal. Wedding Announcement is also a new addition in here. I don't think I actually could afford it at the time for the decks, but now it's been reprinted in Innistrad, so we have a bit of draw that is attached to a, well, enchantment. And of course, it flips into an Anthem after it is done fulfilling its own requirements. Then we have another card I wasn't running before, Invasion of Theros, and, well, it goes into our deck and searches for an aura, of which we really only have one, but we're not running any gods or demigods, so we don't really get any benefit from its other abilities. However, if we can deal a little bit of damage to it, it'll flip into Ifara Ever Sheltering, an enchantment creature who, yes, gets cast, so it triggers our commander, but it allows us to draw a card anytime another enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, and she even gets indestructible if we have other enchantments on the board. Speaking of enchantments, we're gonna use Mesa Enchantress and Entity Tracker to be the enchantresses of the deck alongside this, so that we can draw cards whenever we're casting our enchantments throughout the game. We'll have a little bit of burst draw with Into the Fey Court. It draws us 3 cards, but also makes a bunch of fairy tokens for us. Phenomenon Investigators, which allows us to draw cards in exchange for taking cards from our board and putting them in our hand. But this is fine, because if we can just keep on putting a little card like Military Intelligence back in our hand, it doesn't cost us a whole lot of mana to recast it, and putting it in our hand not only draws us a card, but it gives us the opportunity to replay it so that our commander can summon even more creatures. And summoning creatures is the theme of the deck, so we have Idol of Oblivion to benefit us whenever we spawn one of our fairies, drawing us an extra card every turn. And speaking of extra cards every turn, let's also run Unholy Annex. At the beginning of our end step, we get to draw a card, and then we lose 2 life. If we have a demon, then every opponent loses 2 life instead of us, and it has a way to make a demon built into it. I'm gonna be honest, I don't see myself summoning this demon all the time unless we're, like, really bereft of things to do, but just having a Phyrexian arena that gives us the draw immediately is way better than the original, and I'm gonna be honest, that demon sometimes might actually clinch a game. It's gonna be rare, but it is there. All in all, this gives us 13 spells that are dedicated to digging through our deck, and that's going to be really important because we need to double and triple spell. Alela wants to see a lot of things cast in a single turn to give us a lot of tokens, so why not have enough draw to support that kind of strategy? Next, we have to talk about removal, and we're going to be running a little less interaction that is single-targeted to focus more on sweepers. So let's go ahead and talk about Despark. This is going to be used to get rid of anything that costs a lot of mana that is important, but it's not going to be as good as something like Unexplained Absence half the time. The Absence can get rid of damn near anything, and it gets rid of it for every opponent, period. Grasp of Fate also does the same thing, but it is an Oblivion Ring, so everybody's going to be trying to take this card out, so just be kinda careful what you remove with it. Imprison of the Moon can be used to lock down a commander for, well, ever if somebody is not willing to negotiate. And then we've got a slew of counter spells. Negate to stop non-land or non-creature spells, remove soul to stop creature spells, get out to stop creatures and enchantment spells, spell stutter to counter anything, and well, people have to pay a lot of mana to stop this spell based on the amount of fairies we have, so I mean, this thing's always going to be online. And then refute, because it's a counter spell that lets us draw and discard a card, so I usually find an excuse to throw it in a deck. After that, we have our sweepers. Restricted office can destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater. If we don't have our anthems online, this basically means that we will always be able to use this as a one-sided board wipe. And then it has Lecture Hall on the other side, which is another way to protect our commander, since, again, we are a build-around deck, so we need ways to keep our commander protected. Then we have Vault 75, the middle school. This will exile all big creatures, and then it will allow us to take our swarm board and give it more power. Winnowing, so we can select our creature type and then blow up everything else with a handful of differences. You choose a creature type for every single opponent, so everybody's keeping at least one creature, but like, we are a deck that only uses one creature type, so we can avoid this really backfiring on us. Also, if you're fighting like an elf deck, this thing still has a lot of power because you can just choose the elf warrior or the elf druid that they have and just call druid or warrior, and then suddenly a bunch of the elves still die. Then we have necromantic selection to wipe the board and resummon our commander, though thanks to timing restrictions of state-based actions, we can use this to summon another person's commander, and there isn't diddly they get to do about it. And then we get one of my favorite board wipes, Austere Command. This can get rid of a lot of creatures or artifacts or enchantments. Whatever you feel you need to sweep off the board, go ahead and use Austere Command to make sure you can sweep more of your opponent's things away and keep as many of your things as possible. Finally, we have the ramp section, and most of our ramp needs to cost 2 mana or 1 mana to be useful, but we do have one exception in here we need to talk about, and that is Heraldic Banner. This is an anthem that will grant all of our blue creatures +1/+0, so it makes up for being a 3 mana rock. After that, we have the 2 mana rocks of the Diamond Cycle, Orzhov Signet, Talisman of Progress, Mind Stone, Prismatic Lens, Fractured Power Stone, Arcane Signet, Talisman of Hierarchy, Dimir Signet, and Azorius Signet, with a 1 mana spell in Wayfarer's Bauble, so that we can get a land out instead and still trigger our commander. After that, we have an Inquisitive Glimmer, which can make all of our enchantment spells and unlocks cost 1 less, synergizing with both sides of our deck's enchantment suite. After that, we need to look at our mana base and see what we need to throw in. Our deck leans heavier into white and blue, so we are running 5 plains and 5 islands with 4 swamps. We have the tapped Temple of Enlightenment with Glacial Fortress, Port Town, Artikar Waste, Prairie Stream, and Skycloud Expanse being our untapped lands. The tapped Temple of Deceit for early game Scry with the untapped River of Tears, Choked Estuary, Tainted Isle, Darkwater Catacombs, and Sunken Hollow. And then the tapped Temple of Silence with the untapped Shine Shadow Snarl, Isolated Chapel, Fetid Heath, Tainted Field, and Desolate Mire. We're then running Exotic Orchard and Command Tower as our Omni lands, with our fetching lands being Contaminated Landscape and Ash Barrens as untapped lands, and an Evolving Wilds as our tapped land, mostly because we need access to swamps for the Tainted lands. And finally, we have a singular utility land in Demolition Field, because we can sacrifice it to blow up a Maze of Ith or a Glacial Chasm. Anything that might stop our deck, or like a Maze's End, all of those need to go, and Demolition Field can get rid of all of them. And with that said, that's everything in the deck. So let's go ahead and talk about how to play it. But before that, I want to ask you, is there anything that you would recommend for the deck that I haven't already listed that's under 50 cents? Let me know in the comments section below, because there's always a chance there's things that are important that I've missed. So I mentioned that we're going to be hard mulliganing for a hand that has at least 1 ramp spell, and this one does have it, Azorius Signet. It's also got 4 lands, which is 1 land higher than I would prefer. I want a 3-land hand with a ramp spell and a draw spell. That's the perfect ideal hand with some removal sprinkled in. This hand is close, so I'm willing to take it. Let's go ahead and draw for our turn, and none of our lands have to come into play tapped, so let's just play Fetid Heath and pass to our opponents. Next turn comes up, and we drew Fairy Formation, a secondary draw spell and token maker. That is perfectly fine. Let's go ahead and play Skycloud Expanse and make Azorius Mana to play an Azorius Signet. Then on turn 3, we drew an island, so let's go ahead and play Desolate Mire. and filter our mana such that we can get our commander out. But do recognize we do have 1, 2, 3 cards that have the Odyssey filter settings, so just like be careful of how you spend your mana when you're trying to produce things to make your spells. Then we go to our next turn, we drew an Arcane Signet, and that's kind of the perfect spell for us to have drawn, because we can play a swamp, tap 2, play the Arcane Signet, and that will spawn a fairy token for us. Then we can tap 1, 2, 3, 4 to play the Bident of Thassa, spawning yet another fairy token. Now, we don't get to swing with the fairy tokens yet, which is kind of unfortunate, but it's fine. Simply having them out and ready for the next turn is good. Let's swing with our commander, draw a card, and then pass to our opponents. Next turn comes up, and we have a Marshal's Anthem. It's fine if you want to cast this now, but I would be a little worried casting it this early, only because it's got a secondary use case for getting our commander back if she starts to cost too much. I'd rather hold it in my hand for a while to make sure that that use case is available for us. So we're just going to play Artikar Waste and attack with our commander and 2 other cards. That gives us a chance to draw 3 cards, which is actually, wow, holy shit. Okay, we're going to pay 2 for the Marble Diamond, and that's going to spawn a token for us. And then we're going to pay 1, 2, 3 for the Unholy Annex. I think, yeah, we're going to pay 3 for the Unholy Annex. And then that means we get to draw a card at the end of the turn. Next turn comes up. Let's go ahead and play a Plains. Tap 1, 2 for the Mind Stone, drawing us another card, or not drawing us another card, creating another token. And I belatedly realized I forgot to make a fairy token last turn, thanks to Unholy Annex. We have enough mana to just turn the Annex on right now completely, and that may actually be the move, but I want to see what we draw first. So let's attack with our commander and the 3 fairies that are allowed to attack, and assuming that we hit with all of them, people don't usually have flyers this early, let's draw our 4 cards that we can draw. And not playing the Annex's ability was the right move because we drew a Giant's Amulet, so let's go ahead and not restart the game. That's the wrong button. Let's tap 3 mana in order to both play and equip the Giant's Amulet to our commander. This means we have more fairies that are spawned. We still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mana available, and I actually don't think I played the basic land for this turn. Nope, I did. It's turn 6, and there's 6 lands on the board, and I haven't played a Wayfarer's Bauble. That is fine. Radiant Destiny is in our hand, and Force of Virtue is in our hand. We can pay 1, 2, 3 to get the Radiant Destiny out, spawning another fairy. And I think the right move, actually, is sacrificing this Marshal's Anthem, unless we draw a different white spell. We end our turn, Unholy Annex draws us a card, and then we throw away 1, 2 lands to go down to the amount of mana that we need, and we are going to throw the Marshal's Anthem away to freely cast the Force of Virtue on an opponent's turn. This means that all of our fairies now have 5 extra power, and that's already really freaking strong. And we kept up 2 mana, and our commander is under hexproof. So we've basically presented a board state that can lethal now, because when we enter our next turn, we can play a land, and we can swing with 40 damage based just on the fairies that are here. So pick the opponent that needs to go away first, and to make sure we draw the perfect hand to defend ourselves, we're going to play Waterbender's Ascension. This will, of course, make a new fairy, but when we swing with everything, we are hitting with 9 creatures. This means that Bident of Thassa is drawing us 9 cards. And then Waterbender's Ascension is getting 4 counters, and then drawing us 5 cards. Now that we've drawn all of these cards, we can present lethal to people way faster in the next turn with Starlight Spectacular. This way, even if we get a bunch of things wiped out, we can just have way more power available to us thanks to the Spectacular. And what else do we want to play? We have 5 mana available still. We drew Spell Stutter, which is a counter spell we need to protect ourselves. And I don't know if I care about anything else that is in this hand. I think everything else is basically just fodder. We have a 17-card hand. I would have liked 2 counterspells, but at this stage, we're basically presenting lethal to our opponents. So we just need to discard down. We're going to throw away basically all of our lands because we know we're going to draw lands. We have multiple draw engines available, so we don't need the Idol of Oblivion or the Military Intelligence. We have plenty. Yeah, we don't need Phenomenal Investigators either for that reason. We drew a card with Radiant Destiny. We need to keep a hand that looks kind of like this. An Archon of Sun's Grace so that we can rebuild if we get board wiped. An Austere Command and a Necromantic Selection so we can sweep away problems if our opponents build bigger than us. An Air Nomad's Legacy to give us a draw and a Anthem in case we lose access to things, and the Secret Arcade Dusty Parlors doing a similar job there. Then we have the Spell Stutter to protect our current board state, and an Imprisoned in the Moon in case one of our opponents gets a combo engine online and we need to go ahead and wipe it out. This means by turn 7 we lethaled a player, and we have all kinds of things that need to be answered, and even if we get hit with a Farewell, we have all of the individual pieces we need to rebuild a powerful board state and continue the game from where we left off. And, you know, we're ending with our commander under hexproof with a shit ton of ways to just make our fairies big. And remember, any of the fairies that we spawn without actually attacking, those fairies are blockers for us that are able to just kind of block for massive amounts. So we are in a fantastic spot. Ignoring the fact that Radiant Destiny actually gave all of these fairies vigilance. So these are all blockers. Everything here is a blocker. So we are sitting very pretty right now. This is more of a side grade, a personal preference piece, but I like Sigil of the Empty Throne in a lot of decks, and I think it might have a place here if you can find a slot for it. The only reason that I didn't is if a deck has lower than like 28 or 30 of a card, cards like Sigil are a little harder for me to justify, so I really think that the deck maybe need to be modified a little bit before this can go in. Then we have Darksteel Mutation, a card that can really piss off commander players by shutting down their commander forever. Then we have Ghostly Prison, which can make it way harder to attack us. You can also run Sphere of Safety and Propaganda here if you prefer. Then we have Renewed Solidarity and Patchwork Banner and Scion of Una. All of these are ways to make all of our fairies way bigger, and hell, Tegwill also does this. I really wanted to run him in the deck, but at $5, it's very hard to justify the cuts I'd need to make to keep the deck $20 if I wanted to throw Tegwill in. But being a Flying Death Touch fairy that gives all the fairies we have 1/1, and drawing a card whenever one of our other fairies dies, also means that if we get board wiped, we just like draw 10 or 20 cards. Honestly, there's so many ways in which this thing is fantastic for the deck, but it's also a bit of a double-edged sword, which is really what I like about cards like this. Then we also need to point out that Renewed Solidarity makes us a fuck ton of creature tokens. It makes us creature tokens that are copies of our creature tokens. So that's just kind of busted in a deck like ours. Then we've got Black Market Connections, another way to draw cards and spawn fairies and make treasures. Bitter Blossom, a way to spawn fairies for 2 mana that just is perfectly on theme for the deck. And finally, a Hall of Heliod's Generosity, a land that lets us recycle our older enchantments whenever they get destroyed by board wipes like Austere Command. Hall of Heliod's Generosity is a fantastic include in any enchantment deck. And with that, that's pretty much everything in the deck, from the budget version to upgrades to how to play it and the rationale behind it. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. And, you know, while you're doing that, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and maybe even checking out my Patreon. Anybody who supports me over there gets access to the behind-the-scenes parts of this channel. So if you're into hearing the background vlog things that your creators are going through, then my Patreon is there for that. Also, if you want to pick up this deck, there is a way to get it and still support my channel. Just go ahead and go in the description, and there will be a Buy It Here link under the Moxfield link. That'll take you to Manapool, and Manapool sponsors my videos. If you've never used Manapool before, you can get $5 off of Manapool by using either the deck link or the Manapool link that is down below. And if you have used them before, you still get the ability to support my channel, which is, you know, that's still very good for me. That's something I like. I enjoy getting a little bit of money at the end of the month from them. It makes buying groceries easier. So thank you very much for those of you who supported the channel over the years with Manapool. Thank you, Manapool, for sponsoring the video. And with all that said, I just want to thank you for watching all the way to the end. Let's go ahead and go to the credits before I make this any more awkward.